Employee fired for bringing grandmother to work, but what the elderly woman discovered is amazing. Sarah stood in the bustling lobby of Chicago General, her heart heavy. Just hours ago, she had made a decision that would change everything. In a vulnerable moment, she had brought her grandmother, Evelyn, to work. The chaos of her demanding nursing shift felt overwhelming, and she thought the comfort of family could lend her strength. But now, as her colleagues shot glances filled with disdain, she grappled with the gnawing reality of her actions. It had seemed like a simple act of love, yet it had quickly spiraled into a catastrophe. As her thoughts raced, Sarah felt the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. What had she done? Her superiors valued policy over passion, and now that she had crossed a line, the implications were staggering. The rhythmic sounds of machines beeped in the background, a constant reminder of the patients who depended on her care and expertise. Yet here she was, questioning her very essence. The nurse who had dedicated her life to serving others now facing the possibility of losing her job over a moment of compassion. In this fast-paced world, every heartbeat counted, and she had foolishly halted it with her actions. Was she foolish for thinking she could blend her two worlds? To bring a living piece of her family history into the sterile, rigid environment that prioritized efficiency over empathy. Her stomach twisted at the thought, filled with self-doubt. Could she still call herself a healer, a protector, if she couldn't even safeguard her own job? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A knock on her office door broke her reverie. It was the supervisor, face tight, ready to deliver the news. The words felt sharp, cutting deeper than any blade she had handled in the ER. Fired. Just like that. With a swift stroke, Sarah felt the ground beneath her crumble. The humiliation surged, nausea rising like bile at the back of her throat. How was she supposed to reconcile this moment? In one fell swoop, she felt stripped of her identity, her purpose gone with the loss of her income. Evelyn, sitting quietly in a corner, seemed unaware of the storm that raged within Sarah. But as time passed, she began noticing something unusual through her fragile state. Patients would lean in when Evelyn shared her stories, their eyes lighting up. A woman easing into laughter about a childhood bread recipe, or a frail man listening intently to tales of love and loss. Each exchange sparked something within Sarah. The thought of Evelyn's beautiful spirit shining through the darkness of dementia offered a strange kind of solace. But how? Here she was, wallowing in despair, while her grandmother ignited smiles and strangers trapped in anguish. Clutching her phone, Sarah felt a pulse of determination arise. Could this be it? Was there a chance to channel her grandmother's voice into something that could honor the lessons of elder generations? To create a program that celebrated not just nursing, but the wisdom that resided in those who had lived, loved, and fought their battles? To shift the paradigm from stringent policies to heartfelt connections? As her mind raced with possibilities, the shadows in her heart paled in comparison to the warmth that blossomed from Evelyn's laughter. But she could feel the weight of judgment looming. The threat of being dismissed forever, not just from her job, but from her identity. She couldn't help but feel the tightening knot of fear mixed with a flicker of hope. She had to navigate this murky path, but she was unsure of what lay ahead. Would her determination be enough to reclaim her place in a world that seemed so intent on stifling compassion? Would she honor her grandmother's legacy in a manner that could ignite a fire of change? The tension grew heavier, pressing on her chest like the city skyline blocking the sun, leaving her desperately questioning just how far she would go to redefine the meaning of family, compassion, and justice in a world lost in chaos. The sharp beeping of the machines faded into a distant hum as Sarah found herself wandering through the hospital hallways, her mind a swirl of fragmented thoughts. The echo of "fired" rang in her ears, a steady reminder of her failed outreach to meld her worlds into one. It was disorienting. Each footfall felt heavier than the last, pulling her deeper into uncertainty. They had taken her job, but would they also take her resolve? With each passing moment, Sarah felt the weight of her grandmother's influence pressing down on her. In the midst of chaos, Evelyn had become an unexpected catalyst for realization. Her stories had not just lightened the hearts of patients, they had sparked something ignitable within Sarah, an opportunity to foster connection in a field that sometimes felt devoid of it. The thought settled deep in her stomach like a stone. What if she could do more? So she took a moment in a vacant room, a quiet escape from the bustling chaos outside. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead buzzed in rhythm with her accelerating heartbeat. Her mind raced with possibilities, mapping out what it would take to turn her newfound inspiration into action. She envisioned a program that honored the wisdom of elders, intertwining their narratives into the fabric of patient care. It would be mentorship. It would be healing. It would be a revitalization of the core principles she felt were being sacrificed on the altar of policy. But fear gripped her heart. What if her idea was dismissed as ludicrous? What if the healthcare establishment, with its rigid structure and unyielding policies, burrowed her vision into the ground like an unwanted weed? Sarah clenched her fists, wrestling with the doubts that threatened to push her down. Boldness felt like a distant memory, a trait she had once worn like a badge as a nurse, compassionate, fearless, and dedicated. As she stared at the reflection in the window, something began to shift within her. Who was she if not the person who cared for others, the one who could inspire change, no matter how small? The answer was there, igniting in her heart. She was not just a nurse. She was a messenger, a potential bridge between generations. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, pulling her from contemplation. It was a text from a former colleague offering support, a lifeline amidst the storm of her despair. This simple gesture reinforced the fragile sense of hope flickering within her. Perhaps, if she shared her vision, others could rally around it. Those who believed in the healing power of stories, connections, and shared experiences. With renewed determination, Sarah stepped out of the vacant room. The world outside no longer felt bleak or overwhelming. Instead, it seemed like a blank canvas waiting for her to shape it. Reflecting briefly on the disapproving faces of her colleagues, she could almost feel the seeds of change begin to sow within her soul. But she knew this would not be an easy path. The board of directors, entrenched in their protocols, would likely balk at the notion of integrating personal narratives into their sterile environment. She would have to confront them, challenge their rigid beliefs, and advocate for what she felt was right. The stakes heightened, a sense of urgency enveloped her. The time had come to put her idea into words and pitch it convincingly. But first, she needed to prepare her defenses and ensure she could articulate the profound connection between caregiving and storytelling, perhaps even citing her grandmother's own experiences. Sarah took a deep breath, clenching her jaw. She could feel the weight of her grandmother's legacy propelling her forward. The words began to form in her mind, and with a surge of adrenaline she wondered, was she ready to face the gatekeepers of her profession? Would this be the moment that defined her career? The air thickened with tension as she stepped out, a determined resolve nesting within her. It was more than just a job she was fighting for. It was a vision of compassionate care that connected the past with the present. And with that thought, a flicker of fear twisted in her chest. Was she prepared to confront the resistance that awaited her? The moment of truth loomed just ahead, an uncharted territory waiting to be navigated. The time had come to face her doubts and step boldly into the unknown. Sarah paced in her cramped apartment, a whirlwind of restless energy radiating through her. She had always found comfort in structure, yet now everything felt suspended in uncertainty. The blank walls seemed to echo her internal struggle as she mentally rehearsed her pitch for the board of directors. Would they dismiss her outright? Would they roll their eyes at the thought of stories, a concept so human, in a space dictated by clinical protocols? Flipping through a notebook filled with jotted thoughts, she stumbled upon scribbled quotes from her grandmother. Every story holds a thread of connection, one read, causing a surge of warmth to envelop her. Evelyn had always understood the power of storytelling. To the sick and weary, her tales were a tether to hope, reminding them that they were not just patients, but individuals with rich histories. As night crept in, casting shadows across her space, The gravity of her endeavor began to anchor her thoughts. This was not just her grandmother's legacy she was fighting for. It was a chance to revolutionize how care was delivered in the sterile rooms of hospitals. The heavy weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. What if integrating stories could alleviate loneliness for those confined to beds, foster empathy among caregivers, and humanize the often cold environment of healthcare? Sarah's determination surged, mixing with apprehension. The next day she would face the board, a formidable panel steeped in tradition. They were gatekeepers, but what if they were also potential allies? She took a moment to breathe deeply, closing her eyes and visualizing her grandmother's smile as she shared stories in their living room. It inspired her to reframe her approach. She wasn't an intruder in their space. She was an advocate for innovation. With renewed focus, she crafted her proposal, typing feverishly. She needed evidence of why stories mattered, statistics linking connection to healing. She envisioned structuring her pitch like a narrative, beginning with a heartfelt tale embodying the essence of connection, drawing them into her vision. The morning light filtered through her window, illuminating the notes strewn across her desk. Today was not just any day, it was a turning point. She dressed meticulously, choosing a professional outfit that gave her strength. As she left her apartment, a mix of excitement and fear clashed within her, heightening her senses as she stepped into the world outside. Upon arrival, she was greeted by the sterile hallways of the hospital that had once felt like home, but now seemed alien. Anxiety bubbled beneath her composed exterior as she navigated towards the conference room. Inhaling deeply, she reminded herself of her purpose. She wasn't simply advocating for a program, she was standing for humanity itself. As she entered the room, the board members settled in their seats, faces resolute, some deeply skeptical. Sarah cleared her throat, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. The vulnerability of the moment gripped her, yet she prepared to brave the storm. With a steady voice she began her presentation, weaving together her grandmother's stories with current research on the healing power of narratives. Halfway through her pitch, a board member interjected, skepticism lacing their words. "You think a few stories can change everything?" they challenged, eyes narrowed. Heat rushed to her cheeks. A flash of self-doubt threatened to take over, but she clenched her fists beneath the table, pulling strength from her grandmother's legacy. "Not just change everything," she responded, each word deliberate. "They can change someone's world." The room fell silent, all eyes on her, awaiting more. The tension crackled, and she could feel the weight of their judgment pressing heavily. She knew the battle wasn't over. They were still entrenched in their views, protective of their traditions. But what surprised Sarah was that a flicker of curiosity sparked in some members' faces. Maybe her words were resonating. Maybe she had planted a seed. As she wrapped up, poised to answer questions, an enveloping sense of urgency surged within her. She was all too aware that this was just the beginning. They had yet to embrace her vision as their own, or see the world through the lens she was offering. Would she be able to sway them before the conversation veered toward dismissive? Determined not to falter, she prepared for the crucial moment when she would have to confront specific challenges head-on, navigating the path to victory before her even bolder ambition could unfold. Sarah could feel the gravity of the moment hanging thick in the air, the silence between her and the board acting like a taut string ready to snap. The skeptical board member's question had roused an unease she hadn't anticipated, yet it also lit a spark within her. If they doubted her, maybe there was a way to expand her narrative, stir deeper emotions, and ignite their interest. "Think of it this way," she continued, testing the strength of her argument against their skepticism. "What happens when a patient engages with a story that resonates with them? It provides comfort, a breath of life into an often sterile existence. For many, stories can evoke nostalgia and hope. They remind us of our shared humanity." She saw one or two heads nod slightly, the doubt in their eyes wavering. Knowing she had moments left to sway opinion, she mentally summoned every ounce of her grandmother's wisdom. "My grandmother," she leaned in, her voice softening, "used to tell me that our stories weave connections so powerful that even the darkest moments can be illuminated by the light of shared experiences." As the words left her mouth, she watched their expressions flicker. A middle-aged woman at the far end of the table shifted in her seat, interest palpable in her eyes. Sarah focused on her, allowing her determination to morph into the grace of storytelling. This was her moment to reclaim the narrative. "To illustrate," she said, taking a step forward, "let me share the story of a patient I encountered during my internship, a woman in her 70s confined to her bed after a major surgery. As she lay there, alone and frightened, I simply sat beside her with a book of stories my grandmother had handed down to me. Over time, we would lose ourselves in those tales, and I witnessed her begin to heal not just physically, but emotionally too." A ripple of intrigue passed over the board members, some leaning in, a silent request for more. She could feel their walls starting to crumble, and with a burst of confidence, she displayed another statistic on screen, correlating the benefits of emotional connection to improved patient outcomes. When her heart raced, Sarah slowed her breathing and steadied herself, tapping into the memory of her grandmother's storytelling. These interactions weren't just techniques. They were an art form that could change lives. "In my proposal," she added, "we would find ways to integrate storytelling workshops into the wards. This isn't a radical departure from the medical field. It's an enhancement." One of the directors, who had maintained a practiced neutral expression throughout, finally spoke up. "But how can you measure that kind of impact?" His arms crossed defensively, eyes assessing her. Measuring emotion had been an unyielding puzzle, one Sarah had anticipated. What if we could develop key qualitative and quantitative metrics, improved patient satisfaction scores, reduced anxiety levels, perhaps even shorter recovery times? I believe we can create a pilot program to assess these outcomes effectively. Stories could be integrated into therapy protocols, an auxiliary treatment alongside conventional care. The atmosphere shifted, and Sarah could feel the collective thought process of the room recalibrating. Perhaps they had not been expecting a comprehensive action plan. After all, she was merely a junior staff member speaking against a tide of ingrained tradition. Yet perhaps the thin thread she had woven with her grandmother's legacy was beginning to tangle with medical logic. "Even if we can't measure every detail," she persisted, "the heart of this project lies in connection. Isn't it our duty to explore every avenue that holds potential for healing?" With her heart pounding, Sarah closed her presentation with a final heartfelt plea. Stories are not just entertainment. They are integral to our humanity. It is our chance to make healthcare truly holistic. Suddenly, the board erupted into hushed whispers. Each member turned to discuss her proposal, but Sarah could sense the undercurrents, doubt, intrigue, and perhaps even encouragement, bubbling just beneath the surface. But before she could formulate a response to the possible outcomes, the chairman raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "We need time to deliberate on this," he announced, his gaze steady yet contemplative. As they wrapped up, the uncertainty that had previously clouded Sarah's thoughts shifted into anxious anticipation. Had she made an indelible mark? Would they ultimately embrace her vision, one that had been so intricately tied to a woman whose life was defined by stories? The lingering tension in the room left her with more questions than answers. Just as she concluded her thoughts, another board member shot a question her way. "What happens if this doesn't work, Sarah? Are you prepared to defend your vision when it falters?" She hesitated. Failure loomed as a possibility, but she also realized it could spark new paths. Then she straightened her back, heart pounding with belief, knowing one thing for certain. The true measure of this journey was how she met the moment of adversity that lay ahead. The time had come to face the challenge, and Sarah felt ready to embrace whatever came next. The days that followed Sarah's presentation felt like a tumultuous sea, each wave crashing against her resolve. The board's deliberation weighed heavily on her. In the corridor outside the conference room, staff floated by, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in her mind. Every whisper, every knowing glance was a reminder of the gulf between her aspirations and the deeply entrenched traditions of the medical world. Each evening, after returning from work, she found herself sitting on her grandmother's favorite chair, the deep leather warm from the fading sunlight. How many stories had her grandmother spun in this very seat? Sarah clutched a well-worn book of tales, her aimless fingers brushing the pages as the sweet scent of the leather enveloped her. This connection was her lifeline, yet it felt fragile in the face of impending judgment. "Sarah, darling," her grandmother had often said, "there's power in vulnerability." Those words echoed with an urgency she hadn't fully grasped until now. Perhaps that was part of her challenge, manifesting vulnerability in a professional environment that prized competence over connection. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her reverie. A message from a colleague flashed across the screen, detailing the board's decision. They would allow her to develop a pilot program, but with stipulations. She felt a rush of elation, quickly followed by a wave of dread. Approval came with expectations. Had she truly considered the gravity of what she was committing to? Days passed, and every interaction within the hospital felt more magnified. She caught herself scrutinizing every response, every flicker of doubt on colleagues' faces. The burden of responsibility was palpable. What if her ideas failed? What if her grandmother's legacy crumbled before her eyes? The what-ifs tightened their grip around her heart, stifling her enthusiasm. In a meticulously planned meeting, Sarah gathered a few like-minded colleagues to brainstorm and flesh out the storytelling workshops. They exchanged ideas enthusiastically, yet a shadow hung over them. Sarah sensed an invisible barrier. Some were hesitant to embrace an unconventional approach in a setting that valued evidence over emotion. It was one thing to gain approval, but quite another to convince others of this groundbreaking method's significance. In a moment of vulnerability, she laid out her fears. "I know this is different, but think of the patients. Imagine the solace we might offer them." To her surprise, several nodded, recalling their own experiences with patients who had longed for connection. Energized, she felt an ember of hope rekindle. Perhaps storytelling wasn't seen as a mere addendum, but as a core component of human experience. The more they discussed it, the more she recognized the power of collective belief. Yet a flicker of resistance lingered in the back of her mind. Doubts were still brewing elsewhere in the department. The confrontation with established norms loomed closer, like an approaching storm front. She needed an ally, someone with influence who might share her vision and help shield her from critique. Sarah's thoughts danced around Dr. Mitchell, a respected figure known for her progressive views on patient care. With a heavy heart and a bold spirit, Sarah decided to ask for a meeting. Approaching this luminary felt like scaling a mountain, but for the sake of her proposal she had to forge ahead. When she finally sat across from Dr. Mitchell, words tumbled out, infused with a mixture of hope and urgency. She explained her ideas and the passion that lay behind them. The doctor listened intently, her brow furrowing as she absorbed the full scope of Sarah's vision. "I'm intrigued, but—" Dr. Mitchell paused, her tone shifting to one of concern. "You must be ready for pushback. Not everyone will see the value in this approach, especially if patients begin to depend on emotional connections for healing." Sarah exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility deepen. "I understand. But what if those connections become a lifeline?" The response in her heart was visceral, raw. She wasn't just fighting for her project, she was fighting for the way healing should happen. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Mitchell nodded slowly. "I'll support you, but be prepared to face scrutiny. This journey won't be easy." Those words coursed through Sarah, each syllable a revelation. She was on the precipice of something transformative, and she was ready to brace herself for what awaited. They would face the resistance together, building a bridge between innovative ideas and traditional practice. As she left the meeting, a familiar thrill surged through her veins. This was no longer just about a proposal. It was about redefining care itself. But just as hope welled in her chest, a thought struck her. What if there was a deeper truth lurking beneath the surface of her grandmother's stories? Sarah felt the necessity to dig deeper, to explore the darker aspects of vulnerability she had yet to comprehend. The road ahead seemed steeper than ever, and she could sense that the true challenge had just begun. Little did she know, the greatest revelations often lie in the shadows of oversight, and she was about to stumble onto a truth that could unravel all her hopes. The morning sun filtered through the hospital windows, casting a gentle glow on Sarah's desk as she prepared for the day. Yet the brightness felt deceptive, hiding the turbulence simmering beneath her surface. A heightened sense of purpose propelled her. She was determined to transform her vision into reality. Yet beneath this determination lay an undercurrent of anxiety. Each day, the walls of tradition felt more imposing, and the whispers of discontent more piercing. As Sarah walked through the halls, she couldn't help but notice the gazes of her colleagues. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with skepticism. The duality of their reactions pricked at the self-doubt within her. Was she truly capable of bridging the gap between storytelling and medicine? This was a realm dominated by data, not narratives, and she was navigating it armed with poise, but equally riddled with uncertainty. In her office, ideas swirled like autumn leaves, vivid, colorful, yet fragile. Dates, notes, and drafts lay strewn across the surface, remnants of late-night motivated impulses. Today was the day she needed to solidify those ideas, to fashion them into something tangible. Drawing a deep breath, she began drafting an email to Dr. Mitchell, seeking further collaboration. Building on the doctor's early endorsement felt essential, but her hesitance echoed in her mind. Was she truly ready for deeper engagement? After sending the email, Sarah felt restless. She decided to observe a typical ward round with seasoned doctors. Perhaps she could glean insights from their interactions. It was an experience filled with familiar sights and sounds, the beeping machines, the hushed conversations. But now, Sarah viewed them through a different lens. Each patient presented was a unique story, a chance for connection. Yet her heart sank as she watched one doctor, a senior figure known for his stoicism, dismiss a patient's emotional plea with a clinical detachment that stirred something deep within her. "Focus on treatment, not their feelings," he said, and her stomach churned. How could he disregard the very thing that made them human? It was the kind of moment that would cement her resolve, but it also heightened her fears. She was effectively arguing against the status quo, a force that had rigidly structured healthcare for generations. As the round concluded, Sarah lingered near the nurse's station, her courage waning. She imagined stepping forward, voicing her perspective, but doubt gripped her heart like a vice. At that very moment, a nurse caught her eye and approached her. "Hey, Sarah, we heard about your storytelling program. Sounds fascinating." The sincere curiosity in her voice sparked a flicker of hope. Maybe there were others out there ready to embrace this change, despite the presence of resistance. After a brief conversation, Sarah realized that the roots of her anxiety were intertwining with a fear of isolation. Were all her instincts futile against a culture so anchored in tradition? The inquiries continued to echo in her mind as she journeyed home, where her grandmother's chair awaited, an anchor offering comfort in this tempest. Seated, she retrieved the dusty book filled with her grandmother's tales. The vibrant narratives transported her back to a time of warmth and wisdom, a world where vulnerability was celebrated. Each paragraph felt like a gentle nudge, urging her to dig deeper, to excavate her own stories hidden beneath layers of self-doubt. As night descended, Sarah resolved to approach the pilot program with a newfound vigor. She would conduct workshops not just as a means to an end, but as a living embodiment of connection. Tapping into her grandmother's legacy, she vowed to confront her fears head-on. The stories mattered. But as she twisted the cap off her water bottle, an urgent thought struck her. What if, by exposing her vulnerabilities, she opened herself up to a critique that could unravel her? The tension played out in her mind. A delicate balance between ambition and fear of failure loomed large. Feeling the weight of her decision pressing on her shoulders, Sarah made a pledge. She would transform her personal story into a professional one, intertwining them until they became inseparable. Little did she know, the clarity she sought was lurking just beyond her reach, wrapped in layers she had yet to unravel. And as the echoes of her grandmother's narratives whispered through her thoughts, a deeper question beckoned. How would her determination to share these truths clash with the very traditions she sought to dismantle? She was on the precipice of an exploration that could not only redefine patient care, but also her own place within this intricate system. Ready or not, the revelation awaited on the horizon. The next morning, Sarah awoke with a sense of urgency that buzzed beneath her skin. It was as if the world outside her window was a canvas, waiting for her brushstrokes, yet she felt paralyzed by uncertainty. Each heartbeat echoed her commitment, reminding her that the risk she was about to take would either elevate her or dismantle her ambitions. At her desk, she glanced at her hastily written plans for the first storytelling workshop. A single message floated through her mind with clarity. Expose the stories within the clinic walls. She envisioned a space where emotions intertwined with medical histories, creating a rich tapestry that doctors and patients could navigate together. But lingering doubts threatened to unravel her resolve. Would the doctors embrace this initiative, or would they dismiss it as mere folly? The email exchange with Dr. Mitchell was slow, reflecting a painful hesitation that gnawed at her confidence. She added another line, reinforcing her belief that caring for patients required an affinity for their narratives. With shaky fingers, she clicked send, the ping of the outgoing message like a trigger, propelling her into the unknown. Pacing the hospital corridors during lunch, Sarah sought solace in the bustling atmosphere. She overheard snippets of conversations imbued with medical jargon and detached observations. Yet beneath the surface, she sensed fragments of humanity that deserved to be cherished rather than ignored. But when would she step out of the shadows to meet those moments head-on? Suddenly she spotted Dr. Mitchell in the cafeteria. With her heart pounding, Sarah summoned her courage and approached him, grasping the folder of her workshop proposals tightly. "Do you have a moment, Dr. Mitchell?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Of course, Sarah," he replied with an encouraging smile. They settled at a table, and Sarah laid out her ideas. As she spoke about the power of storytelling, not just for patients but for the caregivers too, her words picked up momentum. She painted a vivid picture. Doctors facilitating workshops where they could learn to embrace vulnerability, where patients might share their fears and hopes. Yet as she spoke, a flicker of skepticism crossed his face. "The intentions are noble, however. Our time is limited, and the pressure to produce measurable results is significant," he countered, folding his arms defensively. His words stuck in her throat, and for a moment, everything felt futile. The prospect of failure loomed large. She could see the tension coiling around his posture, akin to the walls she was trying to dismantle. "But Dr. Mitchell," she implored, "the stories will create connections. They won't only impact the patients but revolutionize our approach to care. Isn't that worth exploring?" A silence hung between them like unspoken truths begging to surface. But before he could respond, a loud crash erupted from the kitchen, drawing their attention. The distraction momentarily shattered her vulnerability, turning her focus to the chaos. Voices yelled and laughter erupted, an unexpected reminder that even in turmoil, laughter could exist. Returning her gaze to Dr. Mitchell, she sensed an opening. Perhaps this was the gateway she needed, an opportunity to shatter the barriers of his skepticism. "We could begin small, a pilot program just for our department," she proposed, injecting urgency into her words. A chance to innovate without overwhelming change. His brows furrowed, contemplating her proposition. The tension shifted. Her quest for validation morphed into something deeper. It was no longer just about proving herself, but rather an exploration of what it meant to support each other through stories shared. The conversation drew to a close, but Dr. Mitchell's expression revealed ambiguity. "I'll think about it," he said, a promise dangling in the air. As Sarah exited the cafeteria, her mind raced with possibilities. She had taken a step forward, but what awaited her was unpredictable territory. The weight of her commitment pressed heavily on her chest. Would she forge bonds amidst skepticism, or would she find herself challenged by deeper currents of tradition? Later that evening, Sarah sat with her grandmother's book open but found her heart restless for new stories to unearth. Was the fear she once carried about failure morphing into a desire to embrace uncertainty? As she flipped through the pages, the stories began to resonate with her burgeoning approach. A question emerged and settled deep within her. What would she lose if she embraced the uncertainty of the unknown? Suddenly, a notion struck her. Could she weave the stories of her colleagues into the fabric of their daunting experiences? The thought ignited a spark, but she needed to confront Dr. Mitchell again, with greater clarity and purpose. Tomorrow held the potential for confrontation, not merely with him but with the very system that spawned her doubts. Her heart raced. The moment had come to face the ambiguity head-on. Would she be courageous enough to shatter her limits, or would the burdens of tradition ensnare her aspirations once again? Sarah awoke the next day with the taste of determination tinged with fear lingering on her lips. The clock mocked her as it ticked away the minutes. Today was not just another day. It felt like a crucible where her ideas would either be forged into something valuable or melted away by skepticism and doubt. Walking through the hospital's bustling hallways, she rehearsed her arguments for the meeting with Dr. Mitchell. The air buzzed with the anxiety of physicians rushing to care for patients, each lost in the urgency of their day-to-day lives, seemingly oblivious to the stories underpinning their work. She felt odd. A whisper of purpose pulled her forward even as she feared the confrontation that lay ahead. When she reached Dr. Mitchell's office, her heart lurched. Sarah knocked hesitantly, bracing her mind for the conversation that could either liberate her vision or constrain it further. "Come in," his voice echoed through the door, inviting her into a realm of uncertainty. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. "Sarah," he greeted her with a casual tone, but his eyes betrayed an underlying wariness. She noticed the papers on his desk, scientifically detailed outlines demanding attention, and her own plans seemed to shimmer like a mirage in comparison. "Thank you for seeing me again," Sarah began, her voice steadier than it had been before. "I've spent the evening thinking about our conversation." He nodded, and she pressed on. "I truly believe that integrating storytelling into our practice can make our work more meaningful and effective." As she spoke, she felt the weight of her resolve grounding her as she articulated her vision. Imagine a scenario where a doctor learns about a patient's life through their stories. It becomes a shared experience, not just a clinical transaction. This affects decision-making, empathy, and even patient compliance. Each sentence built upon the last, as clarity emerged from her initial chaos of thoughts, yet Dr. Mitchell's expression remained unreadable. "You still haven't addressed the main concern, Sarah," he replied evenly. "We are evaluated on measurable outcomes. How can we quantify the effects of storytelling? What if it doesn't yield the results our superiors expect?" They were words she had anticipated, yet starkly faced with them, doubt clung to the edges of her mind. What would it mean for her if this approach was rejected? "If we focus solely on what can be measured," she countered, her passion igniting, "we risk losing sight of the human element that is so essential in our field." As she met his gaze, something shifted. She sensed a growing tension in the air, but also the glint of curiosity. The familiar doubts rumbled inside her like thunderclouds. What if she would forever be seen as too idealistic? With a rush of daring, she laid out her plan for a pilot program, illustrating each step and its potential benefits without downplaying the risks. "What if we initiated on a smaller scale, a 2-month trial in one department?" she urged. "Gather testimonials, observe patient outcomes, and see if our hypothesis holds weight without placing the entire hospital's reputation at stake." He considered her proposal for a moment, leaning back in his chair. Sarah could see him working through the implications, and she felt a surge of courage. "And if it fails," she added, "we will learn. It's not about success or failure. It's about what we discover along the way." His brow furrowed, but then something softened in his demeanor. "Sarah," he began slowly, "you're asking a lot from people who have become entrenched in their practices. Change is always met with resistance, and more often than not, we choose the familiar over the uncertain." "But sometimes the familiar is stifling," she replied fervently. "Sometimes the structures in place fail to acknowledge the very humanity of our roles." A silence seated itself between them, thick with unspoken barriers and potential breakthroughs. Sarah held her breath, prepared for his answer. "You may have something here," he finally said, the tension in his voice suggesting he too was slowly dismantling the walls he had built. Hope surged through her, yet fear pricked at her resolve. Would this be the beginning of a genuine collaboration, or merely the light before another dark twist? She left his office with her pulse racing, exhilarated and exhausted from the battering her ideas had just endured. Yet, amid the emotions swirling within, a new awareness ignited. A realization that the skills she had honed in her personal life were now part of her professional identity. She had passionately advocated for change, confronted skepticism, and defied the norms that sought to shroud her ambitions. But in the depths of her heart, lingering anxieties pulsed. What if she misunderstood what the hospital truly needed? What if, in her pursuit of storytelling, she unintentionally deepened the fractures within the team? Tomorrow could unveil resistance she had never dreamed of encountering. She closed her eyes against the uncertainty ahead. Would she gather her courage to confront the very shadow of doubt? Or would she falter, entangled in the web of skepticism? The turmoil within her gnawed, leaving her restless as her mind spun with implications yet to be understood. The sun spilled through the glass walls of the department as Sarah arrived the next day, illuminating her determination, but also casting shadows of doubt. She clenched her notebook tightly, a collection of her thoughts and revisions from the previous day, a tool crafted from her emerging confidence. However, even as she walked down the corridor, excitement fizzed inside her. She felt an unsettling twist in her stomach. The challenge ahead loomed larger than the flickering hopes that had kept her warm through the night. Her plan rested in the balance, predicated on the fragile willingness of her colleagues to embrace something so novel as storytelling. Would they see it as a threat, another task piled atop their already stretched responsibilities? Or would they also recognize its potential to deepen their empathy and improve patient care? The possibilities slid through her mind like fleeting shadows. As she approached the boardroom, the familiar sound of hushed conversations filled the air. The tension was palpable, mirroring her own this time. She paused at the door, inhaling deeply, recalling Dr. Mitchell's tentative acceptance. He had recognized the kernel of her proposal. Now she had to find a way to plant it firmly within the fertile ground of teamwork, nourish it with collaboration, and hope it blossomed. "Good morning, everyone," she said, stepping into the room, feeling the weight of attentive gazes. The group included physicians who had been entrenched in their ways for years, each carrying their own burdens of skepticism. "Thank you for gathering so quickly." She opened her notebook, hands shaking slightly. The pages trembled like her resolve had, oscillating between excitement and dread. "I wanted to discuss an idea, an initiative that could redefine our interactions with patients, and ultimately our work culture." Some faces remained impassive, while others expressed visible skepticism. She sensed a few glances exchanged among them, a quiet deliberation about what she was about to propose. The air shifted. It was electric, tinged with apprehension. "I propose we implement a pilot project centered around storytelling," Sarah continued, forcing her voice to steady, becoming acutely aware that her destiny hinged on their reactions. She began sketching the outline of her plan on the board, drawing connections to previous failures in care that had emphasized only the clinical data while bypassing the human element. Imagine a framework where healthcare professionals take time to explore a patient's story, understanding their backgrounds and emotions. What if we saw our patients not just as cases, but as individuals with rich life stories? This won't just improve empathy, it may also enhance compliance and shared decision-making. A ripple of murmurs washed over the room. For a moment, she found herself captively watching them, each member processing her vision individually. A physician known for his hard-nosed pragmatism, Dr. Evans, broke the silence. "But how do you quantify the progress of such an approach? We need metrics to report back to the administration." "Metrics can evolve," Sarah countered, the urgency of her message spilling from her lips. "What if we measured patient satisfaction and engagement? We can easily develop qualitative measures that reflect their experiences and narratives. The success of medicine doesn't always lie in numerical outcomes, but in our ability to connect." The room fell quiet again, a heavy silence that felt more like a coiling tension than acceptance. Sarah's heart raced as she realized she was at a tipping point, both professionally and personally. She took a breath, folding forward deeper into her words. "I understand change can be daunting, but it also carries opportunities. Opportunities to rekindle the reason many of us entered this field, to make our jobs meaningful again." A small murmur of agreement slipped through the group. The atmosphere crackled with an underlying pulse, a budding revolution of contemplation. Yet, beneath that flicker of hope, doubts still clawed at her. "Sarah, are you really sure this is the right path?" Dr. Mitchell suddenly interjected, his voice penetrating the air with a sharpness that made her pulse quicken. You are asking us to rework not just our practices but our very perspectives on patient care. It's a monumental shift. In that moment, Sarah realized that the confrontation she had been dreading had arrived. This was no mere discussion. It was an arena, and she had taken a stance. Would she back down under scrutiny, or would she commit to pushing forward? The gravity of her vision weighed heavily on her. She found her voice trembling again, but this time it was laced with unwavering resolve. What I'm asking for is not easy. It's a monumental challenge. But change demands courage, and we owe it to our patients to take that leap. The stakes had never felt higher. What if her aspirations led to division instead of unity? The potential for failure loomed large, yet in that uncertainty lay a spark of possibility, waiting to either ignite or extinguish her fervor. As the murmurs around the table continued, she realized she was standing on the edge of a precipice with one foot suspended in midair. Would she leap forward into the unknown, or would she allow herself to hesitate, tethered by doubt? The moment of decision was upon her, urging her to confront not just her colleagues but the very core of her professional identity. As Sarah awaited their response, a singular thought roared through her mind. The outcome would redefine them all. And with it, she felt the stirrings of something powerful, perhaps even her own liberation. The air inside the conference room buzzed with tension, each individual reflecting the weight of the decision lying ahead. Sarah stood at the precipice of her aspirations, heart racing as the deliberations continued, each second stretching into eternity. The potential to weave storytelling into the fabric of healthcare lay delicately in her hands, but the fear of rejection loomed larger than any supportive voice. Dr. Evans leaned back, arms crossed, scrutinizing her with keen determination. The critical question lingered. Would the physicians who had thrived in an environment driven by rigid policies embrace something so utterly human, so emotionally loaded? Sarah's mind was a whirlpool of calculations and possibilities, yet beneath it all was a quietly burning resolve to push past the trepidation that had been her constant companion. "Sarah," Dr. Mitchell's voice sliced through her anxious thoughts, his eyes searching hers for conviction. "You are inviting us to step away from the clinically driven frameworks that have defined our practice. This isn't just about storytelling. It's about redefining our very purpose in medicine." The room became a tapestry of expressions: curiosity, skepticism, intrigue. "What you're proposing could disrupt the very structure of our patient care model," he continued. "Yes," Sarah interjected, her voice steadying as conviction sparked within her. "But perhaps disruption is precisely what we need. The stories we tell will not only enhance patient rapport, but could increase compliance and overall satisfaction. After all, people remember how you made them feel, not just the treatment they received." The murmurs around the room grew louder, transforming into a lush tapestry of contemplation. Sarah noticed the softening of expressions, heads nodding subtly as her message pierced deep into the heart of her colleagues. The power of connection, the strength of empathy. These were not just soft words, they were foundation stones uniting them all. "Let's start small," Sarah proposed, hoping to mitigate the collective anxiety thickening the air. "We can pilot this storytelling approach in one department, track the quantitative metrics over 3 months. She gestured towards the whiteboard. "Imagine conducting workshops, engaging patients to share their experiences. We can provide the validation they seek while maximizing our care strategy." Dr. Evans remained pensive, glancing at his peers for support before addressing her. "And if it fails?" A weighty pause hung in the air. "Then we learn," she responded firmly, feeling the urgency meld with clarity. "Growth does not occur without risk. If we fear failure, we also risk stagnancy. Change requires both courage and vulnerability." As she spoke those words, she could feel her inherent professionalism merge with the personal growth she had undergone these past few months. Vulnerability was no longer a liability. It was empowerment. She'd learned that embracing her fears brought her closer to her true self, a realization she could now weave into her professional goal. Finally, she sensed a shift in Dr. Mitchell, a retreat from doubt. "You're passionate," he conceded, arms relaxing at his sides. "And that might be exactly what we need." As the board members began to engage with her proposal, Discussing how to implement the initial workshop together, Sarah felt a new surge of confidence filling her from the deepest corners of her resolve. Each suggestion, each inquiry blended into a collaborative dialogue that marked a departure from the isolation so often felt by those within clinical practice. They were all involved, moving towards a common goal, to enhance the humanity within healthcare. Later that evening, Sarah returned home, her pulse still heightened from the engagement of the day. She sank into her grandmother's chair, nostalgia washing over her as the weight of her day faded. Every story shared tonight in that room echoed back to her grandmother's wisdom about connection and caring, and in the midst of that reflective calm, something flourished within. Their agreement to pilot the program was not simply a professional triumph, it represented a significant transformation within herself. She had not only shared her vision, but had also stood firm at the intersection of vulnerability and courage, bridging her personal experiences with a profound professional intent. A tangible result lay before her, a testament to what she could accomplish. But this was just the beginning. With newfound clarity, Sarah envisioned the initiative expanding beyond her department, an evolving legacy, honoring the very stories that had driven her forward. She could already begin to imagine the tapestry they would create together. One filled with vibrant colors of life, healing, and human connection. As she settled into the familiar warmth of her space, the profound realization dawned upon her. She was not just redefining care, she was allowing her grandmother's legacy to live on. For the first time in a long while, she felt not just recognized, but fulfilled. An advocate and catalyst for healing through unity and connection. The journey ahead would undoubtedly pose challenges, but for now, she embraced the peace that accompanied fulfillment. She understood the importance of nurturing her vision, a flame ignited by her grandmother's stories, a light guiding her into a future where compassion triumphed over cold efficiency. As she closed her eyes, Sarah felt a sense of exhilaration. This was only the beginning. Perhaps her journey would inspire others to unearth their own stories, to boldly challenge the norm, and step into a future filled with possibilities. This was her moment, not just for herself but for every patient awaiting a connection to be made. And as the night deepened, resonating with the echoes of her grandmother's tales, Sarah was ready to face whatever came next, because she had so much more to tell. Now, listener, this is the moment you need to subscribe immediately to the channel, to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories of personal triumph and growth. Leave a like now, to feed the algorithm, and support authentic storytelling. Don't forget to comment your reactions and theories about this journey, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible conclusion. You need to show your support because only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of standing together in this transformative journey.